Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Woolfolk again. Woolfolk the other way at the 30, the 40. Woolfolk to midfield. Miles Woolfolk with the pick. The Heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Now, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the Canes for the touchdown. Sam Howe showing the toughness for 6. Cardinals down 4, 35-31. They have the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Throws to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. Med pulls it, tries to roll it apart. Now he's going to throw it and score! Throws it to Paytor in the end zone for the touchdown. They have thrown this lucky for the left hand. Was rolling out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. And today, time to go on to the recruiting trail, this time in the 2027 class for Carolina. They landed a commitment yesterday, and they also had a commitment here recently that we didn't get to break down enough for you guys. So we're going to talk about both of those additions to the defensive backfield, and we'll tell you where the 2027 class stands as a whole. So a little bit of a shorter edition of the podcast, but still a fun and exciting one as Carolina continues to recruit well at the high school ranks. You look at it, and I mean, what they've done here over the past year and a half is really what would excite you if this was a younger coaching staff. I think that's the thing, is that you're trying to win now. And these are a lot of young guys that aren't necessarily going to be able to make a huge impact probably right out of the gate. You would expect that some of those guys will be able to make an impact, but it's not going to be like if they went out and got these guys with a 30-something-year-old coach, a 40-something-year-old coach, someone that was going to be around for a while. Now, again, who knows what the plan is after Bill Belichick ends up leaving campus. It might still involve somebody on this staff, and so they might be able to keep a lot of these guys together and not see a mass exodus to the transfer portal. But that's the thing that I think you do kind of worry about, even with the way that they have been recruiting at the high school level. But there's no denying that they have done a really good job here, especially, holding on to that 2026 class, bringing in the types of guys that they were able to bring in, despite a record that was not where it needed to be in year one. I mean, if you just put it simply, Carolina should have been a lot better than they were. You would expect that, because of that, there would be some guys that would say, you know what, maybe Carolina, not the place that you need to be. But for the most part, they did a good job of keeping everybody that they wanted committed to that class. They were recruiting over a lot of guys. So some of the decommitments, that's the reason why a lot of them happened. That's why most of them actually ended up happening. So tip of the cap to Bill Belichick and his staff. They continue to roll. And now it's gone onto that 2027 trail, as I talked about. And, they go out and get a 4-star safety in Marquise Bryant, a 3-star safety in Chuck Roberts. And, that right now, the class in pretty good standing. So let's talk about both of those guys a little bit. We didn't really get to talk Marquise Bryant here on the podcast. We did bring him up, that Carolina did end up landing him. But at the same time, we didn't really get to do a deep dive on what exactly he brings to the table for the Tar Heels. Hopefully starting next year. Or the year after, excuse me. I mean, 26 guys have to get in here before we can get these 27 guys in. But a guy that just finished his junior year at Rolesville High School in Rolesville, North Carolina. This is one school that Carolina has been very adamant. This was, even the previous staff was very adamant about going to Rolesville, one of the best schools in the state of North Carolina over the past, I'd say 10 or so years, really. I mean, I think that's where you've really started to see that school take off. And Bryant, really solid season this year, 32 total tackles, 7 interceptions, which is what you love to see, 2 forced fumbles for a Rolesville team that finished 9-4 and made the third round of the NCHSAA 8A state playoffs. The season prior, as a sophomore, he collected 58 total tackles, 1 interception, 10 pass breakups, and 2 forced fumbles for a team that fell in the then 4A state title game. If you don't know how it worked, it was 4 classifications in the state of North Carolina for the previous 2 or 3 years. It wasn't that long. There used to be, many people remember the 4A, 4AA. Basically, they've gone back to a similar type of system here now where they have 8 classifications in the state of North Carolina. So that's the reason why it wasn't that he went to a new school. It wasn't that the school itself took a huge jump in terms of, of the classification that they were in. 4A was the top classification in the state. And so both times, this year, not the year that Rolesville was hoping for, but previously going to a state title game, that was great experience for him. And even as a freshman, he was a guy that contributed with 53 total tackles, 1 interception, 10 pass breakups, and a forced fumble for a team that did go to the 4A state quarterfinals. So when you look at Bryant, I mean, he's a guy a little bit smaller, a little slight of frame in terms of the size, in terms of the height. 5'11", 185 pounds. I like the way he's built, especially for a guy of that size. And yeah, he might be a little bit short in stature, but he is a very impactful player out of that safety spot. I mean, remember, Carolina going with a smaller safety in this past class as one of their top-rated players in Jacob Witherspoon, another guy who was a little bit short. So height, not really something that stands in the way of Carolina going out and getting these guys, because they're just simply guys that can make plays on the football. He's a guy that, as we said, with this season, the season that he's coming off of where he had 7 interceptions, just a dude that knows how to take away the football. And that's something that Carolina has desperately needed. We've said it for years now, and it just doesn't seem like Carolina ever has the luck to find that lockdown corner or that ball hawking safety that can really create takeaways and create those turnovers that ultimately Carolina needs and would set up their offense for a lot of success. This year, you kind of needed that. You didn't get it. Hopefully this next coming year, you can, either through the transfer portal, through the guys on the roster that you have currently, or through the guys that you recruited in the 26 class, you can find that. But this is a guy that years down the line, he will be someone that it feels like is going to have a huge impact in that area. Love his coverage ability. Marked it down as very strong, especially for someone at the safety spot. It allows him to succeed when they put him in one-on-one coverage, which could mean that he could make an impact out of the nickel spot soon. That's what I think you really like to see, is when you look at these safeties, you're looking for guys that have the one-on-one coverage ability, because if they do, then that nickelback spot is always a safe place to be able to get some of those guys on the field. The responsibilities, still pretty high, especially if you got a really good slot receiver, but it feels like that's an area where you can be pretty impactful, but not get killed if you end up making mistakes there, like you would if you were a safety over the top. So I do think that that's an area that he could come in, make an impact early on. Again, there are a lot of guys that play slot corner that were in this last recruiting class. So we'll have to see how that works out as we go throughout this coming season, and then eventually into the off season next year, where Bryant will join the team. But that's ultimately something that I think he really thrives in. Another thing that he does a really good job of is playing zone defense. Love the way that he reads the eyes of the quarterback and it just reacts on the football. I mean, he's got pretty good speed that allows him to break on the ball. But I mean, it's just the awareness, the football smarts that you need to see, the football intelligence that you need to see out there when you watch him play. That's what you love to see. And, some people may say, well, if he's a guy that takes away the football the way that he does, is he a guy that takes a lot of risks? Is he a guy that's going to be out of position a lot as a tackler? I think he's a promising tackler in open space. I said, looking at him, looking at the film of him in high school, he looks like a guy that just makes enough games in the run game for him to stick at safety. Is he going to be perfect? No. But is he going to be a guy that is more than willing to get in there and make plays? He certainly is. And, one of the things I didn't write down about him, but I remember from, watching his film, another guy that has a pretty good motor. There are some guys, especially at the safety position, there are times where if you've got corners that can lock guys down on the outside, you don't necessarily have to be, on top of your game at all times. This is one where he's going to be playing hard for, every snap on the field, no matter what it involves, what he is needing to do. He's certainly a guy that's going to help out. And I think he has the ability to stay over the top and be able to help these corners, something that, we desperately need out of this safety group, because we have not seen that from a lot of these safeties here in recent memory. I mean, you go back to some of the safety groups that Carolina had late in the 2010s. Those were some of the best groups that Carolina had, were the safeties. Since then, it's been hit or miss. I mean, you had moments this year where you got good, solid play from guys like Gavin Gibson, like Will Hardy, but there were also mistakes. There were missed tackles. There were blown coverages down the field. Brian, I'm not saying that's not going to happen to him, but hopefully this is a guy that can come in and really make an impact for Carolina at that safety spot early. Most importantly, just someone that during his career can give Carolina what they need, a consistent safety over the top, and one that can create turnovers at the rate that he did at the high school level. I think the one thing that you really pull from this also that I really like is that, this is an in-state commitment. This is huge for Carolina to be getting guys in-state. Now, I don't know how much the focus is going to be on the in-state guys. And I'm someone that, is sort of an in-state snob when it comes to my watch list. We put them out every year, the most wanted list. I'm usually a guy that loves the in-state guys because I think it just, as we've heard Brent Renner say before on this same podcast, it just seems like, rivalry games when you play in the state of North Carolina, they seem to mean something different than if you come from, let's say California, who we'll talk about, we'll talk about a guy that comes from that state here coming up next in Chuck Roberts. But I mean, it's just different if you come from the state of North Carolina, even the state of South Carolina. It feels like there's an understanding of where the rivalry is at. There are a lot of Tar Heel, fans, kids that grow up as Tar Heel fans, that, will have friends that are NC State fans, or Duke fans, especially here in recent years with Duke and the success that they have started to see. And so you need those guys that have a little bit of that vitriol in them, that know how important that rivalry is for Carolina, especially the one against State. That's the one I'm referring to. I mean, yeah, Duke, I think, certainly is one that matters as well. But we know that NC State is the biggest rival that Carolina has in football. So I think that's something that you really hope that a guy like Bryant will be able to bring to this group, the understanding of that rivalry. And I think, just landing more in-state guys. Would love to have his high school teammate back, a guy that was committed at one time to this class a couple of months ago in Amir Brown. But certainly that's the start of what hopefully will be, a little bit more focus in the state of North Carolina. Not saying that has to be the main focus. If there are guys that, fit the system a little bit better from out of state, that's fine. But at the same time, you'd like to see Carolina, put together a group that really mixes well in terms of in-state talent and then out-of-state talent to sort of boost the group there. So hopefully that's something that Carolina and this staff as a whole are looking to do in this recruiting class. All right, let's move on to Chuck Roberts, the most recent commit for the Tar Heels in this 2027 class. He committed yesterday afternoon via a Rivals YouTube stream. He committed to Carolina over Miami, Oregon, Tennessee, and Washington. His commitment comes after he was offered back in September and then took his only visit to Chapel Hill this year. That was for the game against the Stanford Cardinal back in early November. Clearly loved what he saw. Apparently, according to Inside Carolina, just raving about Carolina as a whole. And they end up landing his commitment yesterday. That's ultimately what you're looking for. And for this, this is another one that I think is important because, Roberts, not, the highest ranked guy, 426 overall in the Rivals industry rating, which is what we're going to be going off of moving forward because they take into account all three of the major websites and then pile that together in order to make their composite ranking or their industry ranking, as they like to call it, a little bit different than 24/7 Sports does it. So we'll go with that one moving forward because of how they do it. This is someone that isn't going to blow you away with the ratings, but I think is a really, really good prospect for Carolina. Plays down at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. This isn't a guy that just transferred there either. This is a guy that has been there for 2 years so far of his high school career. He's been developing in that system. And you look at this past year, in 9 games, he totaled 50 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, an interception, and 3 pass breakups. Wasn't the craziest season for him, but according to Rivals, the article that they wrote yesterday about him, he has allowed just 3 passes he did allow, this season is over. So he did allow just 3 passes to be caught the entire season on him. Now, I mean, look, he's not a corner, so maybe that is part of the reason why. To be a guy in the secondary that only allows 3 catches is pretty crazy. So I think that shows you some of what he's able to bring to the table. It's really, rings, or screams the praises. I can talk. Screams the praises of a guy that, is a really good coverage safety, somebody that can take away certain portions of the field. That's what you're looking for when you go out and add safeties to this group. You go back, I mean, it's been a steady progression from him because in his first season at IMG, played in 8 games, had just 17 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, and 3 pass breakups. But as a freshman at Bishop Academy in Mission Hills, California, he was a second-team all-freshman, according to Max Preps, and piled up 104 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. So, I mean, you love what you see ultimately in terms of the stats. I mean, first of all, beginning as a freshman, that's 2 straight guys that we've talked about here, both guys that we've talked about on this edition of the podcast, that Carolina is getting someone that was producing from the word go when they got to the high school ranks. As freshmen, they were on the scene. They were making big plays. That's what you want to see from a group like, this from the 2027 group, because when you look at a lot of guys from the 26 class, they're guys that are, took a little bit of time to get going. Maybe their junior year was their first year that they were really productive. That's certainly something that I think you're looking for, certain traits and things like that. And I get it, but you also like to have guys that do produce at a pretty decent level at the high school level, along with those traits. And so I think you've got 2 of those guys in Marquise Bryant and now with Chuck Roberts. The fact that he plays for IMG Academy, I think, is huge. I think that's an area that we heard when Bill Belichick took over. That was a school that Carolina was going to be recruiting heavily. They are looking at these bigger programs that play national schedules. Landed DQ Forkpa from St. Francis Academy, which is another one of those schools that plays a national schedule each year. Similar to that, a guy like Zion Smith, who plays for DeMatha Catholic or did play for DeMatha Catholic here the last few years. Those are schools that you like to see Carolina going out and getting guys because they're used to playing at a high level. They play some of the best teams in the country. They travel to play these teams. So it's a little bit different than guys that just play around this area. Not saying that those guys can't succeed, but it's more of a college-like feel. And so I like the fact that Carolina goes out, gets somebody from IMG Academy for the second straight recruiting cycle. Will Conroy, the offensive lineman who projects to be a center for Carolina, did play at IMG Academy this past year and was pretty successful. You would expect similar stuff from Chuck Roberts, and that's what makes it interesting. We see IMG Academy show up in a lot of these games on national television. You'll be able to see somebody that plays for Carolina when you tune in and watch one of those games, and that has to be exciting for Tar Heel fans. When you look specifically at Roberts, 6 foot, 180 pounds. So again, not a tall safety, although, you're not expecting many guys that are 6'2", 6'3". There are some guys that are that big. Greg Smith, who Carolina has had this past year on the roster, hoping he's going to return for this upcoming season for Carolina. Still, not 100% sure because we got to get through the transfer portal here. There are still going to be guys that'll probably enter once the portal officially opens. But a guy that's 6'4" at safety, you're not going to see a lot of those guys. You're going to see guys that are a little more smaller build at times at the safety position. 6'1", 6'2", probably the ideal height. But, at 6 foot 180, I really like what he brings to the table. Versatile safety who brings with him some of the best coverage skills for, someone at his position probably in this class. Again, I haven't done the research on a lot of the other guys, really just focus on the Carolina guys, but I find it hard to believe that there are many guys that are going to be able to cover the way that he does, whether it's him putting one-on-one coverage, him, putting himself in zone situations as that deep corner, whatever or as the deep safety, he seems to succeed. Again, one of the things that immediately jumps off the table about him, the motor. Always running plays down from behind, even if they're not on his side of the field. He's a guy that's going to make sure that he is preventing any play. Doesn't matter how far down the field a guy is. He's going to do everything he can to make sure that he gets to that ball carrier and brings them down. He has really strong speed as well, which is part of the reason why he's able to chase down those plays and recover ultimately if he takes a bad angle to the football or, if he gets beat over the top. He's a guy that has good recovery speed that should allow him to make plays on the football at the college level. Does a good job getting in and out of breaks. I think that's one of the big things that you want to see from a guy that's going to be put in some of those coverage situations, is that if you are in one-on-one coverage with a guy that's all over the place, is, using a lot of shifty moves to try to get open, especially, some of those shiftier slot receivers, some of those twitchier guys. Those are the guys that, scare you when you have a safety matched up against them at times. Not in this case. He's a guy that does a great job of being able to open his hips up quickly, change directions quickly, and ultimately stay with whoever he is on in coverage. So really like what you see from him in that area. Didn't show it a lot on his junior film, but certainly on his sophomore film, he brings a nice level of physicality. That's what you want to see, is a guy that has no issue bringing a little bit of that, showing that upper body strength a little bit. And really laying the wood on certain guys when they come across the middle of the field. You want to make the middle of the field a difficult spot for you to be able to attack if you are an opposing offense. This year, there were times where it was easy to attack the middle of the field against Carolina. They don't necessarily have those guys that can lay big hits. Maybe this is one of those guys that has that ability. Now, it's not someone that's going to get out of position doing it. He'll do it from time to time, but, he certainly is a guy that has that element, and you just want to see that mean streak. That's something that we thought we would see from a Bill Belichick group across the board, was that they were going to be very physical. They were going to be a team that teams didn't, when they left Chapel Hill, or if Carolina came into their place and played them, the next week during practice, there would be some guys that would have to recover from playing a very physical game against Carolina. You didn't really see that. Now that starts in the trenches, but certainly it extends to the other positions as well. So I like that ability that he has as a safety to come up into the box and make people pay. I do think that he is a pretty solid run helper, not nearly as involved in the run game as some of the other safeties that you're going to see out there. But when he needs to be involved in the run game, he is. He's got that speed that we talked about that allows him to, read certain plays out, get into the backfield, and make plays. I like, all of what I see from him there. They'll use him sometimes in safety blitzes. I think he's, got enough physicality in that area to be able to free himself up at times as well if he is blitzing. So I think there is a lot to like about his game. I said really promising addition to the Tar Heel secondary, and a guy that has all the tools to be a factor in his time at Carolina. Not sure exactly what type of role they're going to envision for him early on. At the safety position, Carolina is still with a decent amount of guys there depth-wise, but that was a position that they didn't hit nearly as hard as some of the other positions in the 2026 class. They've still got to decide what they're going to do with certain guys like Jamarian Gordon. Are they going to make him a corner, or are they going to keep him at the safety spot? What are they going to do with a couple of other guys at that position? I think that's going to ultimately determine how much playing time might be available for both Roberts and Marquise Bryant when they get to campus next year. So with his commitment, Carolina jumps to number 18 overall, number 4 in the ACC, according to Rivals Industry team rankings for the 2027 class. That's right where Carolina was at this past year, just one spot down in the ACC. But it feels like, you get Marquise Bryant, who's one of the headliners of the class, will be. When you're ranked inside of the top 200, you're going to be one of the top guys that Carolina is ultimately going to land. And I really like the Chuck Roberts addition. I think he's very solid. I think being at a school like IMG Academy is going to get him some exposure. So we'll be able to learn a lot about his game and ultimately what he brings to the table. He's also got a camp season coming up, so he could be someone. He's right on that line. For us, we've talked about it here, me and Zach Hubbard on the podcast over the years. One of the things that we look for when it comes to the top-rated prospects is, are you rated inside the top 500? Because if you are, then we feel like you're pretty much a blue-chip prospect. I think that's the area that at this point, with as many guys that come out, as many evaluations that some of these websites do, you can feel pretty safe if a guy's in the top 500 that he's going to be able to have some sort of effect for you during his time in Chapel Hill. Now, are there misses? Certainly, but those are guys that usually you feel the best about. So I like both of those additions. Glad they've held on to the commitment of Skylar Robinson, another guy that, like his brother, probably going to be a slot receiver at this level. But I like the fact that they've been able to hold on to him, at least so far. We'll have to see whether or not that sticks once his brother, Jason Robinson Jr., ends up finding his next spot. But we'll see whether or not, this is the start of a big class for Carolina, or, is this going to be a smaller class? I think ultimately it's going to be smaller than it was last year. There's no doubt about that. But I do think they're off to a pretty good start, and I think it could be a higher-rated class based on some of the guys that they end up bringing in. Now, the one thing that they really do need to do is they got to start winning games on the field, because that's what's ultimately going to allow you to bring in some of the bigger names as this year goes on. You'll see a decent amount of guys that are going to commit during the offseason, but Carolina needs to make sure that they start winning games on the field because, for 1 year, it might have worked. The pitch that, hey, we can get a lot of you guys on the field early here. Don't know if that's going to necessarily work when you've got an extremely young team like Carolina's got this year, where you could say, we've got these guys who are playing early in their careers. Hopefully, eventually we will circle around and get those guys playing at a high level. With most of those guys probably sticking around next year, I don't know how much early playing time there's going to be, not like this year. So I don't know that that's really a selling point for Carolina. By that point, if Carolina continues to lose, not sure how much the 33rd team is really going to be a thing, the 33rd NFL team, as they said before last year. So that's certainly something that Carolina is going to have to contend with as well. But, this class, really solid start for this group. Now let's see what Carolina can do from here. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Guys, head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Read a little bit about Chuck Roberts. He's over there. I break down his film a little bit more in depth. The stats are there for you guys to check out. And then, of course, if you want, you can go back and check out the Marquise Bryant article as well. It's a little bit further back. We've had a lot of news, a lot of opinion articles that we have been writing here over the last few weeks. But if you want to go back and check that out, we dive into his film a little bit more, his stats a little bit more for you guys. So make sure you guys go back and do that. Other stuff that's on the website right now, Carolina's still trying to finalize its hire of Bobby Petrino. At least we think at this point that's still the direction that they're heading. Chip Kelly just agreed to become Northwestern's offensive coordinator earlier this morning. So that certainly is a little bit of a bummer because Carolina, if they needed a backup plan, that was certainly going to be a really good one that Carolina could potentially have in their back pocket. They no longer have that. So it should be a strong push for them to bring in Bobby Petrino officially, and hopefully that'll be done before they open the transfer portal on January 2nd, which is on Friday. We, of course, will have you covered on that front. Anybody that Carolina is linked to, we'll put articles up about that. So far, no one Carolina has really been linked to outside of the Iowa State transfer cornerback Quentin Taylor, who is a guy that transferred before Matt Campbell officially left for Penn State. So certainly a guy that I think Carolina might have a chance at. Who knows? He could still end up following his head coach to Penn State because it's a pretty great opportunity to play for the Nittany Lions. But I do think that there will be some other guys who will start to jump on the radar. Hopefully, quarterback-wise, Carolina can get in the mix for some guys. Linebackers, Carolina definitely needing to add to that position. And offensive line, certainly an area that Carolina is going to have to add someone this year. Edge rusher, of course, becoming important here in the recent weeks with Tyler Thompson's departure. So bunch of different positions Carolina can be looking at. Not a ton of scholarships, though, that are available, or not a ton of roster spots that are available. So it'll be interesting to see how Carolina can navigate that here in the portal because of how much they invested in terms of roster spots in this high school recruiting class. But we'll have you covered on all those fronts. Basketball-wise, we've got you covered as Carolina dives into conference play. That starts tonight against the Florida State Seminoles. So make sure that you guys keep an eye out on the website. We'll have the preview up there for you guys. I think it might actually be up already from Josh. And then we will make sure that we have you guys covered with the recap of that game. And we'll continue to do that throughout the season. Any other news that comes out on the basketball front during the season, we will, of course, have you covered with that as well, including recruiting news, nearing a decision for one of the top players in the 2026 class, Dylan Mingo. So we'll, make sure that we got you guys covered on that front as well, if anything breaks with that. Make sure you head over to the YouTube page. Just search Heel Tough Blog on YouTube. Give us a subscription there. We'd greatly appreciate it. If you could, just watch the podcast over there. That really helps us out. Love you guys on Facebook. Love you guys on Twitter. There's no doubt about that. And we, of course, we'll take that support. But if you could, just go over there and give us that subscription. Give us those views over there, because that's the easiest way to be able to monetize stuff. That's the easiest way for us to be able to gain some sponsors. So once again, that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening to this edition of the podcast. And as always, go